I've been running for quite a while now, always relying on either my Forerunner from Garmin or maybe my Pace model from Coros, but now Huawei is entering the game, or sort of re-entering the game with their GT Runner series, now the second edition model. I've tested the Runner 1 a while ago, but now this new model a few years later has better materials, hopefully also better GPS, and still hopefully also the amazing heart rate tracking we're used to from Huawei. And given that this is quite a light watch, I'm hoping that the heart rate tracking will be even better than some of the heavier models, for instance the normal Huawei watch series. And that's what we'll be putting to the test today. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Rob and I'm a postdoctoral scientist specializing in biological data analysis. And as you can see, I'm testing it during a run right now. And together with you, I want to find out how good this new watch from Huawei is at tracking your runs, but also your other exercises. And specifically there we'll be testing the heart rate tracking performance and the GPS tracking, and we'll also test how good it is at tracking your recovery and specifically the sleep stages. So let's get to it. Actually I have to finish my run because I'm using a very beta version of the firmware, so some of the runs I did before didn't sync, so I don't have any data yet, but I already had a quick look at the heart rate tracking data for cycling indoors, cycling outdoors, and also weightlifting, and it's looking quite good. So let's see how it performed, and I'll see you back in the studio. Alright, so we're back in the studio and I analyzed all of the data. I still had some trouble getting to the running data. I might be able to still get that. I'm talking with Huawei. If I'm able to actually get it, that's at the end of this video, but I was able to find a workaround already that gives us a rough impression of how the running performance in terms of heart rate was. But for all the other exercises, I have a lot of data and I think the conclusions are pretty solid. So let's have a look. As always, we'll start with indoor cycling, which is one of the easiest exercises for a device to track. And that means we want this to be good, because if this is good, then still the other exercises have a chance of being good as well. And this is actually doing really well. So along the horizontal axis, we have the reference device, which is the Polar H10 ECG chest strap. So chest straps are the most reliable ways of measuring heart rate during exercise. And along the vertical axis, we have the heart rate as measured by the GT Runner 2. And as you can see, almost all points are on or at least close to the blue line, which is really good because that means that they agree almost perfectly. The correlation, this R value up here, is also really high at a rounded value of 1.00. This cannot be higher than 1, so 1.00 is basically perfect. So for indoor cycling, looking really good. We can actually take a look at some example indoor rides. So this is one that I did, and we can see that the red line of the GT Runner 2 is almost identical to the heart rate as measured by the reference device in blue-green. The lines basically overlap perfectly, so nothing to complain about. And this second session looks more or less identical. There's a tiny bit of deviation right here. But honestly, this is perfect. So for indoor cycling, which is not necessarily what this device is made for, I can really recommend the new GT Runner 2. And we can actually compare this performance to that of many other devices I've tested in the past. In this case, I'm limiting myself to all the devices tested in 2025 and 2026. And we're going to use that correlation value from before here along the horizontal axis. And on the vertical axis, I ordered the watches from worst to best. So the further to the right and the higher devices, the better is its agreement with the reference device. So the best devices are here on the top right. And where do we have the Huawei Watch GT Runner 2? Well, it is right here. So it's really one of the best devices out there. It's doing about as well as some Apple devices, some previous testing of Huawei devices like the Huawei Watch 5, but also the Huawei Watch Fit 4 Pro is really close. So all of these are doing really well. So I can really recommend it. But let's next make things a lot more difficult, and let's take a look at the results for outdoor cycling. And those are displayed right here. But before discussing those in detail, I quickly want to ask for your support. You can do that in multiple ways because running this channel next to my full-time job as a scientist is neither easy or cheap. The easiest way for most of you to support is to use my general Amazon affiliate link before making any purchase on Amazon. So if you use that as your default way of shopping on Amazon, you support the channel each time you you make a purchase without it costing you any extra. You can even bookmark it with a Command or Control D. Other ways are of course by subscribing, liking this video, commenting, or using one of my other affiliate discount links down below that also give you the best discount possible. But let's get back to the results for outdoor cycling. This doesn't look quite as good as we had for indoor cycling, but that's not what I would expect. Most devices struggle a lot more with outdoor cycling than indoor cycling, but the correlation value here is still very good at 0.96, and almost all points are at least close to the blue line right here. There's a few moments of deviation, so sometimes detected a too low heart rate and in a few moments a too high heart rate. But this is some of the best performance you could expect. So let's take a look at some example sessions. So here we can see that moment where it had a too low heart rate. So the runner 2 struggled a little bit in one moment, otherwise looking really good. This session is almost perfect except for here near the end. Also this bike ride almost perfect with some minor deviations, but again compared to the competition this is really good. And that's also true for this last example right here. One moment of clear deviation, but again minor deviation and nothing big. And like I said, compared to the competition, this is really good. So let's take a look at that. Again, the further to the top right a device is, the better is its correlation with the reference device. And we can see plenty of Huawei watches that did a good job, like the Huawei Watch 5, the Huawei Watch Fit 4 Pro, the Huawei Watch GT 6 Pro. And the Huawei Watch GT Runner 2 is super close to this. So it did really well. I'm really happy with that. It's basically doing about as well as we expect from the performance lineup of Huawei. And that includes the GT6, the GT6 Pro, all these kind of more sports focused Huawei devices. In this case, the only devices that do better in my testing are different Apple Watches, the Pixel Watch potentially, but they're really not far off. I think all of these right here would be good enough for me. I generally say I want a correlation above 0.9, preferably 0.95 or higher. So that would include all the devices above here, which does include the Huawei Watch GT Runner 2. So really happy with that performance. Now in a second we'll take a look at the results for running, but first I want to take a look at the results for weightlifting, which is generally one of the hardest exercises for the device to track because there's so much tension on your arm in general, and that tension makes it very hard to pick up on the blood flow changes at the wrist, which is what is used to measure heart rate with these kind of green LEDs at the bottom. And as you can see, actually the Huawei Watch GT Runner 2 did a good job with a correlation of 0.94. It isn't perfect, but we don't see this typical pattern where there's many points in this area right here. So typically, according to the reference right here, this would be right here where I'm doing a set of exercises. And what we generally see is that smartwatches detected too low heart rate because they keep detecting that baseline heart rate. But that doesn't appear to be the case, or at least not strongly the case for the Huawei Watch GT Runner. So for instance, for this first weightlifting session, it actually sometimes detected a slightly higher heart rate, which I've not often seen before. So either my reference struggled, or it's in the way it's calculating the heart rate, like how much it's smoothing to the left and right of your heart rate. So it could be the way you define heart rate a little bit, where maybe Polar is a bit more conservative, but still here Huawei is doing a really good job. And also for the second weightlifting session, so this was chest and triceps right here, it did a really good job. It didn't fully detect all the peaks in my heart rate, but it came much closer than most devices out there. So I'm really happy with that. Again, we can compare it to other devices, which is displayed right here. And we want those devices to be as far to the top right as possible. And the Huawei Watch GT Runner is one of the best performers out there. It is sort of the edge of devices I would recommend. Again, 0.95 is sort of that minimum, especially for weightlifting. And it is really close to that. It's actually performing more or less identical to the Huawei Watch Fit 4 Pro. So far I'm really happy with the heart rate tracking performance of the GT Runner 2. But now I actually wanted to look at the exercise that this whole thing is about, running. And there, as I said, I ran into some issues because for some reason that data didn't sync to the app. Now I want to be very clear here, that doesn't mean that the normal Huawei Health app is bad or unstable. I actually got access to a super early version of a new release, and that meant that they hadn't fully developed it yet, but that was needed to connect this pre-release version of the GT Runner series. And for me that meant during the 5 or 6 runs that I did, that particular data wasn't synced to the app, which meant I didn't have access to it, but I could actually see it in the menu here on the watch itself. So what I did is actually took a screenshot on the watch and I tried to overlay that with the reference data. So this is very janky, but it does give us an impression of how it performed. So that is displayed right here for one of the runs that I did. So the reference is this thinner, darker red line, and then transparently I overlaid the heart rate as it was visible on the watch as detected by the GT Runner 2. And as you can see, it's very close in most cases. There are some moments of deviation like right here, and also the dips appear to be a little bit less extreme. But of course the resolution on the watch is very low, and I suspected the watch actually did almost perfectly for this area right here and this area right here, but potentially here there was a slight cadence lock. But here again, I would need to get access to the raw data to see if this is the case. Overall, pretty solid performance. And here we have a second exercise, and this showed a bit more deviation, so again a run. The general patterns agree very well, but it could be that either there is some smoothing on the watch, at least as it displays your heart rate, so that means that these dips aren't quite as extreme, and also there's some rounding here at the corners. So overall, it does look relatively solid and the general patterns match, and I find it difficult to say if there's actually some deviation or if this is just the way it's visualized on the app of the watch itself, which is of course a relatively tiny screen. But for now, I do expect, based on all the data I've seen, that the heart rate tracking performance of the GT Runner 2 is very solid. The only thing I couldn't test in detail now is this sort of cadence lock issue, but based on these 2 runs where I overlaid the data, it does look pretty solid with only one potential moment of cadence lock right here. Otherwise, I think it looks really good, and I suspect these deviations right here might just be due to the smoothing of the signal and not an actual heart rate tracking issue. But again, if I do end up getting access to the running data, I'll put it at the end of this video. For now, I want to move to the next segment, which is sleep stage tracking performance, which hasn't been a strong suit of Huawei. So let's take a look at those results. As always, we'll be comparing the heart rate tracking performance of the Huawei Watch GT Runner 2 to the Z Max EEG headband, which is a headband specifically designed for scientific sleep tracking. It's sort of the silver standard in sleep tracking. It can actually measure my brain waves, my eye movement, so it's pretty solid, and it will give us a general impression of the sleep stage tracking performance of this new Huawei watch. And as always, it isn't that amazing. So the sleep stage tracking just isn't the strong suit of Huawei, and generally most manufacturers use the exact same algorithm across their watch lineup, which means you get similar performance. So on top right here, we have the sleep stages as tracked by the reference. So we're going to focus on deep sleep, light sleep, and REM sleep. And on the left right here, we have the results of the Runner 2. And if they would perfectly agree, all these yellow values right here should be 100%. So each column is normalized to 100%, meaning that we can see what percentage of each sleep stage according to the reference was predicted as each sleep stage by the Runner 2. Now, first of all, we see that deep sleep agreement is okay at best at 56% or so, meaning that 56% of what was deep sleep according to the reference was also deep sleep according to the Runner 2. Light sleep agreement isn't very good at 47%, so actually a lot of the light sleep was instead classified as deep sleep or REM sleep. And finally, REM sleep agreement is the worst at about 36%. So only about 36% of what the reference device said was REM sleep was also classified as REM sleep by the GT Runner 2. So that's really not a very high number. So where the heart rate tracking looked very good, I don't think the sleep stage tracking is that solid. But again, we can compare the performance of the GT Runner 2 to other Huawei devices, but especially to other devices out there. And that is displayed in this overview right here. So the average sensitivity, so the average of those percentages we're just looking at is along the horizontal axis right here. And the worst out of all the sleep stages is along the vertical axis. Again, that means that the further to the top right a device is, the better is its agreement with the reference device. Now, all the different brands in here have different colors, and Huawei is marked in sort of a purple-ish color right here.
And as you can see, all Huawei devices are basically on the bottom here. So they're really some of the worst sleep stage trackers. Together with, for instance, the Coral Space 4, only the Band is doing worse. So it really appears to be something Huawei might be investing still in the future, but at the moment isn't very strong. So the results for the Huawei Watch GT Runner 2 are right here. It's basically performing identically to the Huawei Watch 5, very close to the Huawei Band 10, and honestly also basically performing identically to the Watch Fit 4 Pro, the Watch Fit 4, the GT6 Pro, and the GT6. So basically all these devices will give you more or less the same performance. Now, I would say there's sort of three classes of devices in this plot. There's the worst performers, including Huawei. So the mid-tier performers, which include Garmin, Amazfit, Polar, and at the edge of the mid-tier is Samsung with the Ultra 2, the Galaxy Watch 8 Classic, and the Galaxy Watch 8. So all of them, if you average them out, are somewhere around here. So really at the edge. And then there are the best performing devices. Now, regular viewers will know this, but just to summarize, I would say at the moment there's sort of 6 brands that are performing best. So we have Apple Watches like the Apple Watch Series 11 or the Apple Watch Ultra 3, Pixel watches like the Pixel Watch 4, then we have the Oura Ring, the Whoop strap, and finally the H Sleep Pod. Now, out of these, I would say that Apple Watches, Pixel watches, and the Whoop strap are sort of multi-purpose devices. So they're decent to good for heart rate tracking and also for sleep stage tracking. So you can use them for both sports and recovery, whereas the Oura Ring and the H Sleep Pod are specifically designed more for that sleep and recovery part. So the Oura Ring is relatively comfortable to wear on your finger. I have an affiliate link actually for both the Whoop strap and the Oura Ring down below if you want to try them out and get the best discount possible. And finally, there's the H Sleep Pod, which is the most comfortable to use, but it's not actually a wearable. It's my main sleep improvement device because it goes around your mattress and can cool and heat each side of the bed independently, so you and your partner can sleep at your preferred temperature and get good sleep stage tracking to boot. It is really expensive though, but if you want to try it out and get the best discount possible while trying it out, use my affiliate link down below or up here. You'll be supporting the channel and supporting your wallet at the same time, but again, only get it if you can really afford it. I really love it, but it is just not a cheap device. So those are the top performers in this overview. The one that is left out here is called Sleep 2 because I didn't test that against my EEG in 2025 or 26, so it didn't make the cutoff in my code. I'll be retesting that soon. That's also a really good sleep stage tracker. It's more of an algorithm where you need to buy a Polar device separately or you get it with the app, but it's also a quite expensive subscription similar to H Sleep, the Whoop strap, and sort of the Oura Ring as well. So be aware that some of these require monthly payments as well. So again, only get these things if you can really afford them. They're sort of a tool to help you sleep better, but they're not needed. It just makes life easier and a little bit better in my opinion, but it's just an added tool. But again, getting back to the Huawei Watch GT Runner 2, that's just not a good sleep stage tracker. It might be good enough to roughly track your total time in bed, maybe things like heart rate variability, but it wouldn't be my main focus for sleep stages. So that's sort of the recovery part covered. So far to summarize, heart rate, great, sleep stages, not great. But the other thing you might want and need for your sports tracking is actually good GPS tracking. So let's see how the Huawei Watch GT Runner 2 did for that. Now again, here I should note that for running, I couldn't get my GPS tracking data out. It's a similar issue to what I had for the heart rate data, but I do have data for cycling. So let's see how that did. And the way we're going to test the GPS tracking performance is by cycling the same route multiple times. And if the routes overlap really well, that means that the GPS tracking is likely very good. But if there's a big deviation between the same route cycled multiple times, that likely means that the GPS tracking isn't that great. And I did that cycling 3 times to work and 4 times cycling back from work. And here we can see the 3 times I cycled to work. So in the beginning here, the signals are quite consistent. But then here we have quite some deviation. Here I actually did have to turn around because of the snow, but overall it's not looking amazing. There is some deviation right here. Also here 2 different routes, so this is an actual deviation in the signal. But overall looking somewhat consistent, but not amazingly consistent. Though here it looks really good. There I have nothing to complain. Then here we see a bit of deviation, and on the corner here I did take different routes. A little bit of deviation right here, also right here, not perfect, I would say. So this is okay, but I have seen better. It's sort of second tier GPS tracking performance. But let's now take a look at 4 times I cycled back from work. So let's get rid of these right here. So this is 4 times I cycled back from work, 1 times from this work location and 3 times from this work location. Now, one thing I didn't talk about yet is that the signal does appear to be acquired quickly. So it's always at the location where I started the bike ride that the signal was acquired, where for some devices this might take a while. For the GT Runner 2, it's almost instant, which is good. But let's again look at the consistency between the rides. This is okay, not perfect, a little bit of deviation, but in the beginning here, sometimes devices struggle. This is looking okay. Here, a bit of deviation. Now comes the roundabout. This also looks okay, sort of second tier, a little bit of deviation before, but around the roundabout looks quite good. Some other devices struggled there. This looks okay. Here it looks really good, so really consistent. Here I might have stopped for a quick McDonald's stop after a long day of work. This looks okay again. This looks okay, not great. So overall, sort of solid performance, maybe on the lower end of Garmin and sports watch devices, but much better than many other devices out there. So I would say sort of second edge of first tier performance in terms of GPS tracking. It could be a bit better, like right here we do see some deviation, but overall probably good enough. I would be really interested in also seeing those running results, but unfortunately I don't have those available right now. Overall, solid enough that I would trust the pace that this device would give me based on this data if I'm running and also my speed during cycling. So overall, pretty happy. I think as a sports device, this Huawei Watch GT Runner 2 is a really great heart rate tracker, a pretty good GPS tracker, and not an amazing recovery tracker, at least when it comes to my sleep stages and my total sleep patterns. Probably the heart rate and heart rate variability are pretty solid. So if you're into running, I could actually recommend the GT Runner 2 as it stands right now. Now again, I do want to do a more detailed test of the heart rate tracking during running still, and also take a look at the GPS tracks, but unfortunately just because of the beta version of the app, I wasn't able to access that. But my impression is, based on all the other exercises, that it will likely do a good job for heart rate tracking and a pretty good job for GPS tracking. So that's all the data, but to close off, I do also want to share some of my personal experiences with this device and why I think this device might be a good choice for some of you, but maybe not all of you. So let's start with the price. At the moment that I'm recording this, the exact price isn't known, but from what I've heard, it will be similar to the older GT Runner right here. So when it launched, this was about 2,500 Chinese yen, or at least that's what I understood from Huawei. And the price of this new device will be similar, which is about $350 or so. So it's not the absolute cheapest device out there, but compared to sort of the mid-range Garmin running watch like the Garmin Forerunner 570, it is quite a bit cheaper, and it comes in 3 colors, as you can see right here. At least this is the information I got. I have the Dawn orange one right here, so it really has some orangey colors here on the side, but there's also a blue and more understated black version. I wish there was also an understated white version, but that's just my personal preference. I think overall for me the look of the device is a little bit less important, but this color scheme I wouldn't wear on a daily basis. So for a run, this is fine. For my daily driver, as in a watch I wear continuously, I would go for the blue or black version. Now getting back to that price of about $350, probably like 330 euros or so, that's actually quite okay for all the features you get. Compared to, like I said, a Forerunner 570, which is what I would compare this device to, it's actually quite a bit cheaper for all the features you get, and it's also a bit less restricted in terms of mapping functionalities as far as I know, but don't hold me to that. Where the Forerunner 570 does just software block certain features, I don't think that's the case for this GT Runner 2 right here. But again, some information is still a bit sparse as we're still pre-release, but generally Huawei tends to software lock fewer things than, for instance, Garmin does, which doesn't mean I don't like Garmin devices. I actually use a Forerunner 970 myself for all my runs. It's just that you do have to enter specific price points to get all those features with Garmin devices. Now, in terms of battery life, the GT Runner has actually been great. I've charged it once since I started testing, and I didn't actually fully charge it when I started testing. Huawei quotes about 14 days of battery life with typical daily use, which does sort of match my experience. I've actually been doing a lot of exercise with it, so that's been reduced a little bit, but it could definitely go for 10 days with quite a bit of exercise with this device. And just to give you an impression, Huawei quotes up to 32 hours of battery life in outdoor running mode with GPS, so that's pretty good. And in terms of look and feel, it is a major upgrade compared to the older GT Runner 1, which was very plasticky. It was very light, but in my opinion, this fabric strap combined with the more metal design looks a lot better and also feels a lot more premium. So I'd be a lot more likely to pick up this device than the older Runner 1 just based on design and looks. Hi, Rob from the future, or a few hours later here. I actually did want to look at one more thing, and that is the weight of the Huawei Watch GT Runner. So the build is actually titanium, so even though it's metal, it's not super heavy, and I just wanted to get a total weight. So here on my scale, let me actually show you with my camera, it tops out at 43.6 grams with both the device and the strap. So that's pretty light compared to the old watch that was 53.6 grams, probably also because the strap was a bit heavier. And let me actually grab my Forerunner and the Pace Pro from Coros to compare. Alright, so here we go. The Forerunner 570 comes in at 55.9 grams. The Coros Pace Pro 50.4. So actually, even though it looks quite heavy with the strap, it's the Huawei Watch GT Runner 2 that is lightest at about 43.6 grams. So weight is not an issue with this device. Now, if you get yourself a Forerunner 165, so the smaller version of the Forerunner, it will probably be similar to the GT Runner 2. But I just wanted to show that even though it has a metal titanium casing, it's not heavier than some of these more plasticky watches from other running brands. So overall weight shouldn't be an issue with the GT Runner 2. So that's been my experience with the Huawei Watch GT Runner 2. I think this is a very solid device unless you care about your sleep stages. The heart rate tracking is amazing. One of the best sports watches out there in terms of heart rate tracking. For this, based on the testing I've done so far, I wouldn't require a chest strap for my exercises, which might be something many of you want. The GPS tracking was pretty good. Again, I would like to do the running test for that or get access to my running data for that, so I might add that in a future video. But for now, based on the impression I got from cycling, it's pretty solid. Maybe not quite as good as Garmin. In some of the internal testing, Huawei does show they're on par with Garmin. But I would say based on the testing I did, which I would call sort of initial, it's sort of getting there, but maybe not quite there yet, but they're very close. But there I would definitely say the GT Runner 2 seems to be good enough. So most of you wouldn't notice that difference. So for the sports, I can definitely recommend it. Now, the last thing to discuss is sort of the elephant in the room, and that's that many of you are watching this from the US and will have trouble getting access to this device because, as far as I know, Huawei is still not allowed to sell their devices in the US. If you're in Europe, you're in luck, you can get this device. The release date is likely a few days or weeks later than in China. But for Europeans, I think this is a good choice. For Americans as well, but be aware that there are restrictions on Huawei. So even if you get the device, I don't know how easy it is to install, for instance, on your iPhone. Probably on Android, things are a little bit easier. Now, I'm generally very curious also to hear about your experience with Huawei devices, and especially for those people watching in the US. What do you think of Huawei devices? Have you been able to get access to some? Have you had any trouble actually installing them and using them? Now, one thing I've actually noticed somewhat counterintuitively is in working with Huawei is that they're much more privacy focused and aware than some other brands out there. Probably because they're more at risk of being excluded from other markets as well if they do something wrong there. So I actually have no worry sending my data to the Huawei servers, because there I feel I'm even better protected than with some other famous brands out there. But that's my subjective experience so far. Now, if you do end up getting the GT Runner 2, maybe you want to get yourself a Whoop strap, an Aura ring, an 8-sleep pod, another device, or anything at all on Amazon for that matter, even something as small as toilet paper or coffee beans. Use one of my affiliate links down below to get the best discount possible if it's available, and also be supporting the channel at the same time. Now, given that you watched this entire video on a Huawei watch, I think you might like this video on the Amazfit Helio strap or this video on the 8-sleep pod.